Thank you very much, Senator DePisa. The next Member of Parliament for the constituency of Christchurch West, when once a general election is held in Barbados. I want to thank you too, Senator DePisa, for the excellent work which you have been doing in the Senate of Barbados to keep Barbadians enlightened and educated on the issues that beat in their breasts from day to day. And thank you for preaching as clearly and as convincingly as you do the gospel according to the Democratic Labour Party. I'm very pleased to be here today, and I want to thank the chairman and the members of the executive of the Christchurch West constituency branch and the members of Christchurch West constituency branch for once again having me here at their annual luncheon. A successful luncheon every year always coincides with Soca on the Hill. And I've been doing this consistently for the last 7 years. And I do not allow anything else to collide with this commitment. Very pleased to be here to share this afternoon with you. This year's Christchurch West luncheon, though, comes at a time of some very intriguing occurrences in Barbados. And I am very pleased to be here against that background, because I have been observing what has been going on in Barbados. I've listened very carefully to the things that are being said. I've observed very carefully the things that are being done. And the things said and the things done remind me yet again, if I needed to be reminded, that in politics, battles are never finally won. You have to fight them over and over and over again. As people in the United States of America who benefited from the civil rights movement and the gains registered around the time of the civil rights movement, have realized that these civil rights were not to be taken for granted. You have to fight for them every single day. Because in politics, battles are not ever finally won. And that's the context within which I want to evaluate what is happening in Barbados today. In the fullness of time, in my time, I will speak directly to the nation on a number of things. But I'm addressing a party branch occasion here today, and I feel myself under a moral compulsion, a political compulsion too, to bring you up to date on events in Barbados on the 23rd day of July 2017. One of the malcontents at the center of what is happening in Barbados today reminded me recently that we just celebrated 50 years of independence, and we had all of these 50th anniversary celebrations, but that person wanted to let me know that the year 2017 was also the 80th anniversary of the 1937 riots, and that I had my celebrations and that they're going to have theirs. And I internalized that warning, and I observed what was happening in Barbados. Now, the 1937 disturbances broke out on the 26th day of July 1937. today is the 23rd day of July 2017, and 3 days, tomorrow is the 24th day, and 2 days after that will be the 26th. So we had the 50th anniversary celebrations already, and according to what this malcontent told me, there are some other celebrations to come. Now, I am not going into any details on that here today, because that is best dealt with where it should be dealt with. And it's not to be dealt with here at any party branch luncheon. Everybody knows that there was a global financial meltdown in the last quarter of the year 2007. Rich countries and poor countries were affected by that global financial meltdown. The countries in the Caribbean were all affected by it. Every single country in the Caribbean today, every single CARICOM country today is under financial and economic pressure. Every single one. Those that have oil, like Trinidad and Tobago, are under pressure. In fact, recently, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago said at one of his Meet the People meetings that he has to give thought to the fact that the public service of Trinidad and Tobago may be a bit too burdensome on the finances of the country, and he has to look at ways and means to deal with that reality. Guyana, which celebrated 50 years of independence with Barbados last year, has been under pressure for many, many, many years, and the global financial crisis did not help in that regard. Jamaica, with its, of course, Guyana has bauxite, Guyana has timber, and Guyana has a vast land area. Guyana is the same size as Great Britain. I paid a visit to Guyana sometime last year. The population of Britain is about 65 million now. And Guyana, a country that is the same size as Britain or slightly larger, does not have a population of 1 million yet. But they have bauxite, they have land area, they have forestry, timber, and they're under pressure. Fortunately for them, there's been a great oil find recently, and I sincerely hope that that oil find can effect the kind of turnaround which that country has so desperately needed ever since its independence. Jamaica has gone through about 6 or 7 IMF programs since 1980 and is still experiencing profound economic pressure. That pressure made worse by the global financial meltdown of the last quarter of 2007. Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Barbados were always regarded as the 4 more developed countries of CARICOM, and all of them are under pressure. Barbados has been under enormous pressure ever since the global financial meltdown as well, because we have something called a service economy, which depends significantly on tourism and on international financial services, and international business. And therefore, a lot of what we are able to achieve here depends on what is happening in the countries on which we depend for tourists and on which we depend for international business and financial services. So the 4 MDCs in CARICOM are under pressure. The other countries called the LDCs, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Antigua, and so on, are all under pressure as well. And I've sat as head of government of Barbados at many recent CARICOM meetings and heard their leaders say, that if they were not selling their citizenship, if they were not selling passports, their countries would be basket cases. So they have citizenship by investment programs. In some cases, the persons who are granted citizenship do not even have to come to the country in order to get citizenship or be able to get a passport. But those programs keep them going and allow them to pay their bills from day to day, from week to week, from month to month, and so on. I have fought them at CARICOM over those programs, and the Barbados delegation can confirm all of this. Because I say to them, look, when you grant these people citizenship in your country, and Barbados is not a part of the transaction, those people become CARICOM citizens and have, based on our freedom of movement arrangements, the right to come into Barbados when they like and how they like, although we don't know them. The most recent case of that, according to the advice, the security advice which I was given, is that 2 persons from nowhere in the Caribbean, but who became CARICOM citizens as a result of those citizenship by investment programs, came to Barbados to go to the American embassy to get visas. The American embassy turned down the applications for the visas. But the persons involved said, no, we are not going back to where we came from. We have a right to 6 months stay in Barbados, and we want to stay here under our 6 months stay under the freedom of movement regime. I am not going to call the names of the countries from which they came. I would only say this: you have to catch about 6 or 7 different airplanes to get to where they came from. But that is what is going on in the Caribbean, because all of the countries of the Caribbean are under pressure. The English-speaking Caribbean, the Dutch-speaking Caribbean, Suriname went in IMF program and, according to my advice, failed the IMF exams. And of course, Haiti has always been under pressure. The government of Barbados took the position, look, this is a critical issue, and we have to manage this issue in such a way as to make sure that we protect the households and the businesses of Barbados, shield the households and shield the businesses from the worst effects of this crisis. And we said, look, if you're going to shield the households, there is no better way to shield households than by ensuring that you can protect as many of the jobs that people have as possible. So protecting jobs became our primary focus. You have heard all the calls in Barbados from various quarters for us to solve the problems that we are facing by just cutting the public service. Now, this is not a new call. In the year 2001, a report was written for the previous administration, which report said that the public service of Barbados was too large by about 10,000, and that the government should look to reducing the public service of Barbados by about 10,000 persons by the year 2010. That did not happen. We still have the public service there, and we are trying our best as a government, as a caring government, as a government committed to the stability of the households of Barbados, to protecting the jobs of public officers in this country. Because when we were told to lay off people, we were told that you cannot get the savings you want by laying off maids and messengers. You have to go up the ladder and lay off some of the people at the top who earn big salaries, and that is when you will get the savings that you want. The government took a position that is not the route we want to go. We want to protect the stability of the households of Barbados. And we want to protect the stability of the households of Barbados because the issue we are facing in Barbados today, and you have heard this over and over and over again, is a fiscal deficit issue. We are spending more money than we are earning in Barbados. We have not increased the number of agencies that we have to spend money on. The present government, the government over which I preside, and the government over which Prime Minister Thompson presided between the year 2008 and the year 2010, did not create any new agencies that are gobbling up more money than was previously the case. The agencies that are gobbling up the money are ones that we came and found. And we have determined that we want to protect jobs in Barbados. But we say that if there's a gap between what we are earning and what we are spending, we have to find other ways to make up that gap. There's a gap between what we are earning and what we are spending, not only because we have not been able to reduce our spending on employment. The government wage and salaries bill and the government pensions bill are very, very high. That is why people call for a reduction in the number of jobs in the public service. But one of the other issues that we had to deal with is that in the year 2007, before we came to office, the Canadian government introduced a budget in which they took certain measures that would affect our international business and financial services sector. And those measures took effect from around the year 2011. And if we did not respond to those measures, businesses had already begun to leave Barbados and go and be domiciled elsewhere. And a committee was set up to look at the issue and to advise the government. And that committee advised that if we were going to stop businesses from leaving Barbados, businesses in the international financial services sector, we had to lower the tax rates for the businesses at the top. We took that advice. The businesses stopped leaving, but the advice also told us that we would have to make a sacrifice of revenue in the short term. The sacrifice of revenue that we're talking about is that the government has had to give up $200 million per year or more every year for the last 6 years. Over $1 billion in tax revenue over the last 6 years. So we were earning less, but still had to maintain the obligations which we came and found. Now, historically, when this problem has cropped up in the past, and it cropped up under the Tom Adams administration between 1976 and 1986. It cropped up under the Sandiford administration between 1991 or around 1991. Historically, what we have done, even though we had revenue problems, we decided historically to solve revenue problems by expenditure means. In other words, even though we're getting fewer taxes, we decided rather than trying to deal with the tax issue, we can deal with the spending issue. So we solved the problem by sending home people or by reducing salaries by 8% and so on and so on. My government took the decision that this time around, rather than sending home people, that we were going to deal with a revenue problem by revenue means. That is, to get more taxes to come in so that we can continue to support the standard of living and the quality of life of our Barbadian population. And that is the context within which, at one stage, we introduced a municipal solid waste tax about which people marched. We also introduced amendments to the Barbados Revenue Authority Act to get people to acknowledge, those persons who owe the government taxes, to acknowledge that they owe the government taxes, and to agree to pay 10 cents out of every dollar in the short term, and to enter into arrangements how they were going to pay the remainder. And there was a threat to shut down the country over that. Whereas everybody else get paid in full, the government was saying, if you owe me $1, just pay me 10 cents, agree that you owe me, pay me 10 cents, and the other 90 cents you owe, let us agree how you're going to pay it over time. And the place was nearly shut down over that. The lawyers complained, everybody complained, Nepcha and Kaya complained. And then, more recently, in the year 2016, the budget of that year, we introduced a national social responsibility levy charged at 2% on imports into Barbados and on goods manufactured or produced in Barbados. And we exempted from that tax any manufacturers or any production that touched the manufacturing sector the agricultural sector and the tourism sector in their urge and in their remit to earn foreign exchange for Barbados. The tax performed reasonably well. There were no major complaints about it. And the government decided, since the deficit problems were continuing to haunt us, and since the Central Bank of Barbados was continuing to have to print money, that is, to make up the difference between what we were earning and what we were spending, make up that difference that was left after the banks and the insurance companies and other entities in the financial sector did not contribute as much as was expected. The central bank had to make it up, and that's called printing money. But the tax performed reasonably well, and we decided to increase the tax, not to introduce a new tax. The National Social Responsibility Levy is not a new tax. It was introduced in the year 2016 in the budget of that year, and it was only increased in the year 2017 on the 30th day of May this year, when Minister of Finance Chris Sinkler introduced this budget. We moved the rate from 2% to 10% in the hope that we could get the revenue. And we wanted the revenue not only to narrow the deficit or to remove it altogether, but we wanted the revenue because public officers in Barbados had not got a salary increase since the year 2010 and had been working faithfully for the government from then until now. As recently as Friday afternoon, I started a heads of department meeting at the Lara Court with my heads of departments, Prime Minister's office, at 2:30 in the afternoon. And every single head of department sat down in that meeting until we were finished at nearly 11 o'clock Friday night. They worked faithfully. And we agree that they are entitled to some kind of reward for their loyalty, for their commitment, and to their attachment to the best interests of their island home, Barbados. Now, so the government increased the rate at which National Social Responsibility Levy was being charged from 2% to 10%, increased it by 8%. Who tell the government do that? Howls of protest could be heard across the land from the main opposition party and from some people in the trade union movement and in the private sector who they sponsor or who sponsor them. And the government of Barbados was being asked to reduce the tax. Now let me make this point very clearly. I want to welcome the members of the media who are here today, and I want to make this point very, very clearly. Barbados is run and governed by a constitution. That constitution was settled in 1966 when Barbados got its independence. That constitution guides the government. Trade unions are governed by the Trade Union Act and all the other laws that are passed to promote the interests of labor and that allowed the trade unions to carry out their work without let or hindrance. Companies are governed by the Companies Act, Chapter 308 of the laws of Barbados, and all of the other laws that Parliament has passed over time to allow companies to protect and to promote the interests of their shareholders. But the government is sworn to protect the Constitution of Barbados, which is the highest law in the land, a law to which every other law in this country is subject, a law to which every other law in this country is inferior. The Constitution is the highest law. Now, I say that because I want to remind all of you here and remind Barbadians, I will do that at a time that I will choose, that under the Constitution of Barbados, the only agency that can determine policy and that has final and principal responsibility for policy is the Cabinet of Barbados. Section 64, subsection 2 of the Constitution of Barbados makes it explicitly clear that the Cabinet is the principal instrument of policy and is responsible for the general direction and control of affairs in Barbados and is accountable, of course, to the Parliament of Barbados. So whether you're talking financial policy or social policy or any other kind of policy, according to the Constitution of Barbados, the Cabinet has principal responsibility for that. The other point I want to make is this, that Parliament, the Parliament of Barbados, is given power under Section 48 of the Constitution, that Constitution, to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Barbados. Parliament makes laws for the peace, the order, and the good government of Barbados. So when a Minister of Finance stands up in a budget, it doesn't matter whether the Minister of Finance is Chris Sinkler, or David Thompson, or Owen Arthur, or Erskine Sandiford, or Richie Haynes, or Tom Adams, or Errol Barrow. Whenever a Minister of Finance stands up in the Parliament of Barbados and imposes a tax, that tax becomes law from the time he is finished speaking the last sentence, and remains as law until, within 4 months or so, an actual law is passed under the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act. You're entitled to collect any taxes he imposes until he gets around to bringing a bill to Parliament. That is the Constitution of Barbados, and that is the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act. That is what a budget speech means. Whether Barrow delivers it, Tom Adams delivers it, St. John delivers it, Sir Harold St. John, Erskine Sandiford, Richie Haynes, David Thompson, Owen Arthur, or the present Minister Chris Sinkler. So, once the tax was introduced, once the rate was increased, we took the decision that since there should be no misunderstanding on the part of businesses or labor or workers or anybody else, we would not make the tax effective on the first day of June or at any time in June. We would give a whole month so that we could consult with all of the stakeholders in the economy, explain to them what is intended, remove all of their doubts, remove all of their anxieties, remove all of their fears, although they should have no doubts, anxieties, or fears, because the tax was not new. It was just an increase in the rate of an existing tax. So we did that. We met with the private sector, and we met with the unions. I did not attend the meetings with the private sector. I left that to the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Finance and his staff, and the central bank people, and so on. But I determined that I was going to attend the meeting with the labor movement. And that meeting happened on the 23rd of June. That meeting lasted for 6 hours. Friday, the 23rd of June, that meeting lasted for 6 hours from about 3 in the afternoon until just after 9 in the night. And we explained why we had to increase the rate. We explained to the labor movement that if we are to be able to pay the increase that they're asking for, we have to have the revenue from which to pay it. I chaired the meeting, and I said to them, look, when we pay civil servants, we don't pay civil servants by prayer. We pay civil servants with money. We don't pay them with prayer. We don't pay them with wishes. We don't pay them with hopes. We pay them with money. And that money has to be earned, has to be brought in so that we can pay the public officers the increase they're asking for, and so we can deal with the other problems that we have. A proposal was then put on the table, not by the government, not by the government. A proposal was put on the table by one of the delegates of the National Union of Public Workers. That delegate said, Prime Minister, okay, we understand you can't make a decision on salary increases now. But after 3 months, you should have some idea how the new tax is working. And if the new tax seems to be working, would the government be prepared after the end of September to have a look at giving public servants some kind of increase, however small that increase may be? I said, sure, sure, sure. That proposal did not come from the government. It came from a representative on the delegation, a delegate of the National Union of Public Workers. We said, look, there are some issues that have nothing to do with salary that the trade unions can continue to discuss with the Ministry of the Public Service. And at the end of September, we'll look and see how the tax is performing. And then, once it is performing as we confidently expect it will perform, we would be prepared to look at some kind of increase for public officers. The non-salary issues that I was talking about, for example, one issue has been that for years, you could have public officers working and working long enough for their pension rights to accrue after 10 years or whatever it is, 10 or 12 years, I don't remember which two. But you become qualified to get a pension. But if after having been qualified to get a pension, you were to run into trouble with the police and get a criminal conviction as a result of some some felony you committed during the course of your duty as a public officer, even though your pension rights had accrued, because you got a criminal conviction, you could lose all those pension rights and go home empty-handed. And the government said, look, the government has been saying, look, damn right, if your pension rights accrued and you get into trouble after that, you will have to leave the public service, yes, but you should leave with your pension rights intact because the pension rights would have accrued before the commission of the criminal offense. That's just an example of one of the non-salary issues that we were talking about, and on which the government is convinced and which the government was prepared to concede to the trade unions. But there are other non-salary issues. For example, if a post gets abolished, when you are age 30, should you have to wait until age 65 to start to get your pension? These are the kind of issues that, the non-salary issues that we were talking about. But we said, look, at the end of September, when we see how the tax is performing, as long as it is performing in accordance with our cherished expectations, we would be prepared to look at the issue of a salary increase. And I left the meeting. I told the Minister of Finance, look, the press waiting downstairs, go downstairs and just let the press know where we are on this issue. The unions will speak to the press as well, but I think we have made some progress on this issue. At least everybody understands that we need to get the revenue in order to pay salary increases, but certainly also in order to narrow the fiscal deficit. You have heard, I believe that you're hearing all this for the first time. You would not believe that that happened in the presence of the Minister of Finance, the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of the Civil Service, my Government Information Service officer, people from the Barbados Revenue Authority, were all present when this happened. This is not a figment of the Prime Minister's imagination. That happened on the 23rd of June in a 6-hour meeting in the Cabinet office at Bay Street. And we left the room, I certainly left the room, on that clear understanding. Today is the 23rd of July. That meeting happened on the 23rd of June. Yet you are hearing there's nothing called dialogue. It is as though no meetings have taken place between Labour and the government in the last umpteen months. 23rd of June, that understanding was reached. The 30th of September hasn't come yet. So what is the issue? We said we would wait until the 30th of September to see how the tax is performing, and on the basis of that performance, we would determine the government's ability to pay a salary increase, however small. But you hear no dialogue. The Minister of Finance had met with the key stakeholders in the private sector for the whole month of June. As I said, I didn't attend those meetings. I left that to the Minister of Finance and to the officials in the Ministry of Finance, the Central Bank, and the Barbados Revenue Authority. I went to the one with Labour and I chaired that meeting. It lasted for just over 6 hours. Now, let's come to the more juicy part of all this. I asked at the last social partnership meeting we had at Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Center for two committees to meet to look at the fiscal deficit and the foreign reserves. I said that I wanted these two committees to meet. One, to look at the fiscal deficit and how we may deal with that problem. And one, to look at the issue of the foreign reserves, because we have been having some foreign reserves challenges. In the past in Barbados, we've always had foreign reserves challenges, but we've borrowed the foreign reserves when we weren't earning the foreign reserves. These two committees, I said, should be made up of representatives of the government, of the trade unions, and of the private sector. And they were so made up, and the two committees met. I said they were supposed to report to me in about 2 weeks. They reported to me just over 2 weeks after, and they made a number of recommendations. We then convened a meeting between the private sector, the labor movement, and the government to look at the two reports that had come in. And we agreed that some of the measures, some of the recommendations that were made were really medium-term recommendations, that some of the recommendations were longer-term recommendations, and that some were shorter-term recommendations, and that the government would continue to look at these things with a view to seeing what of the recommendations we could use for the benefit of the economy, by which we mean for the benefit of the people of Barbados. Now, once those reports were finished and the recommendations were embodied, I got a letter from one of the unions. That letter is dated the 11th of April. The letter said to me, now look, you know that there are certain elements that want the workers to carry this full burden. And they would like to offload all that we are in onto the shoulders of the workers. We want you, YOU, letters addressed to me. We want you to understand that you have to work in conjunction with the labor movement to protect those without a voice, those that are disadvantaged, and those that are marginalized from these elements that would want to offload all of this burden on the backs of the workers. The letter was written to me confidentially. I did not share it with the private sector at the time, because I felt that there was some kind of concordat, some kind of agreement between the labor movement and myself on that issue. My rationale in politics has always been, from the first time I spoke on a political platform in Independence Square in August 1994, I made it very clear that I'd come into politics to promote the interests of workers. And I've said it over and over again, I didn't come to confirm the mighty in their seats. I came to exalt the humble and the meek. I made that very clear. And I've never changed my position in politics. But all of a sudden, I've seen all of these elements come together and claim that they feel disrespected, they feel sidelined, the government is not conducting any dialogue. All these things are being said, none of which, quite frankly, satisfy that plateau of truth, which I understand to be required in circumstances of this kind. So, I've spoken already about the issue at Parliament, because we've been having marches, don't forget, we've been having marches around here now from 2013 until now. I chaired a meeting of governments, heads of departments and technical departments and so on Wednesday the 12th of July. And the purpose of that meeting was to get a status report on government's projects. Government has a lot of projects going, and I wanted to know what were the bottlenecks that were preventing some of these projects and so on from making any progress and so. And I got reports from all of the departments and so on. That projects review meeting started at 9:15 in the morning. We broke for an hour for lunch, and the meeting finished after 7:30 on the Wednesday night. When I left Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Center and checked my phone, I don't carry my cell phone into meetings because I think it is bad manners to sit down in a meeting, cheering it, and every time your cell phone is ringing and you have to break off and take calls and respond to texts and so on. So I always leave my cell phone out of meetings. I don't carry them into cabinet. I don't carry them into any meeting that I'm chairing or any meeting that I'm going to or attending. When I checked the phone, I realized that the head of the Private Sector Association had sent me a text asking me to have an urgent meeting with him on the following day. The following day would have been a Thursday. And Thursday is Cabinet Day. To plan meetings for any Thursday, politically speaking, is really a sin against the Holy Ghost. So I called him and I said, look, I saw your message, but tomorrow is Thursday. I never know how long a cabinet meeting is going to go. And quite frankly, I do not set other meetings for Thursdays because the cabinet must have full, free, and uninhibited right to express itself and to discuss the problems of Barbados every Thursday. I began to talk to him from the time we got to the bus roundabout. I just left Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Center. I stopped talking to him in my driveway, the driveway of my private residence at Coles Road in St. Philip. So you can judge how long we were talking. But he said to me, look, I wanted to let you know that I met with the trade unions today. They feel very disrespected by the government. We feel very disrespected too. And we are now on the same side. And he said, we want you to have an urgent meeting if you want to avoid social unrest. I said, but you say that you feel disrespected by the government. Who disrespected you? He said the Minister of Finance a few weeks ago disrespected us. I said, but how comes I'm now hearing about that? Well, the subject was changed and went off to something else, because there was no answer to that. Because when Senator Jephthah Ince made what was thought an improper comment, he got hold of me the following morning and told me he would like Jephthah Ince to apologize. But the Minister of Finance is supposed to have disrespected him some weeks ago, and I was now hearing about it for the first time. Anyhow, I said, the bottom line is we cannot have a meeting tomorrow. I don't know what my diary is saying for Friday. If it is at all possible, I will try to sit down and eyeball you on Friday. But by the time we got into my driveway, by the time the car got into my driveway at Coles Road, St. Philip, he said to me, but I think we have covered all the issues that I would have covered in the meeting anyhow, so I don't think there's any need for the meeting anymore. I said, well, even though there's no need for the meeting anymore, if it is at all possible, I will still get hold of you on Friday for an eyeball-to-eyeball exchange. He thanked me for the courtesies that I had extended to him, for getting back to him so quickly, and so on, and wished me well for the night. He said he didn't envy me that I had to go and read cabinet papers at that time, having chaired the meeting for the whole day, but that is how life is, and we parted as long, enduring friends. Cabinet met the following day, and then on the Friday, I had a whole set of meetings to which I had to attend, and I did not call him on the Friday. But the Friday afternoon, as soon as I got home, I got an email from my secretary with a letter from him. And that letter, I read it and reread it and read it again and read it over, because I could not believe what I was reading. The letter said to me that he was disappointed that after our meeting, after our conversation on the Wednesday night, cabinet the Thursday, the Friday, then the Friday came, that after our conversation, I had not yet scheduled a meeting to meet with them. His words, to avert social unrest. And the letter went on then to say that he wanted me to convene a meeting as a matter of urgency to set out a schedule of consultations that should take place to design a fiscal policy for Barbados on which the social partnership or the social partners could agree. And he said he was giving me, you listen to this, he was giving me until 4:30 on Monday the 17th of July to get back to him. He was giving the Prime Minister of Barbados a deadline of 4:30 on the 17th of July, Monday, to get back to him. I read the letter and read it over and read it again and turned it upside down and read it and I said, well, what is this at all? You know, I said I'm going to reply to it. And I replied to it at length. And I made it very clear that it was not the responsibility of the government to arrive at any fiscal policy on which which would command the support of social partners, because the cabinet alone under the Constitution had responsibility for policy, fiscal policy and every other kind of policy. I said consultation and dialogue and so on are very important, yes. And government should take away whatever they think is useful from consultations and dialogue. But when all is said and done, the government has to make the decision. And I said, so far as this talk about social unrest is concerned, the government is not party or privy to any plan for social unrest in Barbados. If other social partners are, I think as Minister of Defense and Security, I should refer the matter to the Royal Barbados Police Force. And in my concluding paragraph, I said to him that nothing, that I had never written a letter to anybody and given them any deadline, except when I was practicing law, and I was writing to allege wrongdoers on behalf of clients, and it's part of the protocol of lawyers' letters. Senator DePisa or her brother Francis could tell you. You say, I give you 14 days or 21 days to reply to me. If not, I will put the matter in court. That's a protocol thing. But I don't write letters to people giving them deadlines. And I said to him, look, you know, nothing in my understanding of the word civility, by which I mean good manners, would have inclined me to write such a letter to you as president of the Private Sector Association of Barbados. You know, the letter was delivered to him. I heard nothing further from him. I know that he has toned down, because I think there were things he did not understand that he understands now. And then, all of a sudden, I heard that there was going to be this big march tomorrow, which private sector employers are paying their workers to participate in. They are paying their workers to participate in. Well, you know, a few people got on to me begging me to meet quickly to head it off. I do not want to head it off. I want it to happen. People of Barbados have to see what is possible around here and how far people will go in the pursuit of their perverse objectives. But I want to say this. No country in the world, no president, no prime minister, no sheikh, nobody who's running a government can run it by undisguised blackmail. Cannot. Otherwise, you're not a government. Barbados is governed by a constitution, and that constitution establishes something called the rule of law. I want to make it very clear here this evening that there is no industrial dispute going on in Barbados, not one. The only dispute, when I checked with the Ministry of Labor on Friday, that is engaging their attention is a breakdown in salary negotiations between the Barbados Workers Union and the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. And that matter has been referred to the Chief Labor Officer. And if it breaks down there, it will be referred to the Minister of Labor. And if it breaks down there, and the Minister feels so inclined, she'll refer it to the Prime Minister. Apart from that, there is no industrial dispute going on in Barbados between employers and employees. And therefore, there is no basis for anybody to claim that there is any industrial dispute. So far as a march to force the government to reduce air tax is concerned, let me make it very, very clear. that is not on. If the government comes to the conclusion that the tax is not achieving the objectives which the government intended it to achieve, the government will have to look again. But the idea of any entity, any business entity in Bridgetown deciding that when the government is going to impose taxation of any kind, you have to get their permission before you impose it, that is not on. And I don't believe, quite honestly, that the trade union believe that that's the way it should be done either. Long before the 1st of July came, before anybody had to pay that tax, you were hearing how hard it is. Not a halfpenny charge yet, you know, but you were still hearing how hard it is and how much hardship it's going to cause even before it was tested. Well, now, as I understand it, they're all together. I got 2 messages that I want to just communicate before we sit down. Maybe 3, but I'll try and compress them into 2. There's one public sector in Barbados. One public sector in Barbados. Made up of the government, the central government, its statutory corporations, and its government-owned companies, because even when the government has companies, usually the government is the only shareholder, like Barbados Port Inc. and like Granley Adams International Airport Inc. and then maybe 1 or 2 others. There's one public sector in Barbados. There is one labor movement in Barbados, made up of many different trade unions, NUPW, BWU, BUT, you know all the trade unions we have around here, but there's one labor movement. At one stage, we tried to bring it under one umbrella called C2SAB. The Barbados Workers Union broke away, and therefore that caused a little asymmetry in the relationship between the BWU and the other trade unions and so on. So there's one labor movement and one public sector. But there are many, many private sectors in Barbados. There are many private sectors in Barbados. And not all of those private sectors make it to the table where decisions are made. So when you hear that the private sector does this or has done this or wants that, the question you always have to ask is, which private sector? All the barber shops, all the people you see selling beside the road, all the minibus owners and drivers and so on, they're private sector too. But they never make it to the banquet table to partake of any meal. So when you hear the private sector wants this or the private sector wants that, the question you have to ask is, which private sector? The hairdressing salon and so on, they're all private sectors. The caterers and so on, Ronnie Giddens here, he's private sector. So it's always a question, which one you're talking about? I see David Durant here. He was in church this morning and so on. He and others here would know what I'm talking about. All I'm saying is this. Very, very often in life, not only in politics, in life generally, the voice you are hearing is the voice of Jacob. But the hand you are feeling is the hand of Esau. And you have always to be very careful when doubts are created over whether the voice is really the voice of Jacob, or if the voice is the voice of Jacob, who that hand really belongs to. Because it's not the hand of Jacob. And there are some elements in this society who 5 years ago was saying the people can't wait for so long. We have to do something. People can't tolerate this for 5 years. After the first year, the people can't tolerate it for 4 more years. After the second year, the people can't tolerate this for another 3 years. We're now down to months. And the people still can't tolerate it. But the voice is the voice of Jacob. The hand is the hand of Esau. The second point I want to make is this. Most of us here, all of us here, have kept a pet at home called a cat. Cats come in all sizes, in all shapes, in all colors, in all breeds, and so on. But you know something? Let me tell you something. Whenever you get past the color of the cat, and the breed of the cat, and the size of the cat, and the sex of the cat, and whatever, a cat is a cat only because he's interested in catching mice. And I hope that those elements in Barbados who feel that a cat and a mouse can enjoy fellowship in the same space are not fooling themselves. Anytime you see a lamb and a lion laying down together, the lion is dead. At worst, both the lion and the lamb are dead. But anytime you see a mongoose and a chicken together, there's only one element in that relationship that is going to end up losing. That's the chicken. Because mongooses eat chickens. Chickens do not eat mongooses. And this newfound fellowship that I'm hearing about, not too long from now, these same leaders are going to have to sit down across the table with these same employers to negotiate wages and salaries and conditions of service. And I hope that the same fellowship, the same goodwill, the same choral singing commonality that I'm hearing about now will prevail then. The government will not be involved. We don't seem to learn from our mistakes. Look, we have a piece of legislation on the statute books of Barbados today called the Employment Protection Act. Political parties were promising that piece of legislation since 1971 in both of their manifestos, both manifestos of the political parties. This government, under the Democratic Labour Party, had the courage to pass that piece of legislation. It was introduced many years ago. An attempt was made at it by the Barbados Labour Party. One speech was made, only the introductory speech. and then it was banished to file 13 because their bosses said, we do not want any employment protection laws around here. And they had to obey their bosses and put it one side. This government passed it. The complaint you're hearing now is that it is not a fair piece of legislation. It favors the workers too much. And it needs to be revisited because employers are now at a disadvantage in dealing with their workers. These battles have to be fought over and over and over again. And I don't want anybody here to be misled into believing that at any stage in this country's history, you are ever going to reach a stage where there will not be people in Barbados who do not believe that they should be running of the affairs of Barbados without having to face any electorate or rely on any vote. That, as long as there's a Barbados, there's going to be that. And that is precisely what part of this struggle is about. That is why it is thought that fiscal policy should not be the sacred preserve of the Cabinet of Barbados. It should be something you discuss and find out what certain elements want. And once you satisfy them, then the people of Barbados will have to take what is handed to them. Well, I'm not saying it can't happen. I am not saying it can't happen. All I can say at this stage is that the Democratic Labour Party that I joined around 1969, and in which I have believed even before I joined it and believed since I joined it, the Democratic Labour Party that I now lead is not only a Democratic Labour Party in terms of its name, it's a Democratic Labour Party in terms of its practice. And we believe that all politics must have to do with trying to realize the aspirations of people, and people should have a choice or have the choice in determining who should administer their affairs from time to time. And nobody is going to get this Prime Minister to genuflect or salame to elements that have not faced the electorate, but who want final decisions on Barbados' policies and Barbados' future to reside with them and them alone. It is just not going to happen. I would be a traitor to those who fought for universal adult suffrage so that people could vote only on the basis of their age rather than voting on the basis of how much property they owned or how much income they were earning. I live in a parish, St. Philip, grew up in a parish where in 1940, Winter Algernon Crawford defeated a planter to become the MP for St. Philip, and he got only 117 votes. And there were thousands of people living in St. Philip. But only about 300 people could vote because only about 300 people could satisfy the property and income qualifications to get on the electoral register. That Barbados is a Barbados of the past, and it is not coming back. We're all in this together. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I just thought I would give you that status report on what is going on in Barbados today. It is not true that there has been no dialogue. I gave you the evidence. It is not true that the government is indifferent to the demands of public officers for increases. I just gave you the evidence that we even accepted their recommendation to revisit this issue at the end of September once the legislation began to perform as satisfactorily as we expect. But it is true that the Prime Minister of Barbados was told to meet or to schedule a meeting or else there'll be social unrest. To meet in order to avert social unrest, which is a coded way of saying if you don't meet, there'll be social unrest. Well, I am planning none. I don't know if anybody in the cabinet planning any social unrest in Barbados. And it is in writing. And social unrest, the phrase social unrest can only mean one thing, social unrest. Creating a situation where the society is thrown into chaos. And I have said that as Minister of Defense and Security, I can't deal with that directly. It's a matter for the Royal Barbados Police Force and any assistance they may need if we get to that stage. So, let me thank the Chairman and the Committee of Management of the Christchurch West Branch for once again hosting me here this afternoon. Thanks for the warm hospitality, the delicious lunch, the good fellowship. And I look forward to being here with you next year around this time with Senator DePisa, no longer Senator, but MP for Christchurch West, and with the Democratic Labour Party return to office. Thank you very much.